Hi there, it's another brew day in the Mitchell Brewery. I've got the boiler on, my trusty sign, slightly different arrangement today because my shed's getting a bit full up of stuff. So I've got all my ingredients in the kitchen, so I'm going to crack on. Today I'm going to make a stronger, hoppier version of Home Pale Ale, which is my last beer, and that was a very successful one. So you can see it's getting there, it's about 90 plus at the minute, so I'm going to wait for it to boil, then it'll cool down and I'll crack on with the rest of the brewing. This is the Maris Otter Pale Malt. Now this forms the backbone of my beers and most of the malt I use. So today I'm going to use about 4.4 kilograms of this stuff. The rest of the malts make up about 600 grams. So you can see this constitutes most of the malt in the hop, and you can see in the beer. And you can see it's very dusty. You can see all that. Basically what we have is barley grain, which has been basically allowed to sprout. So it's put in a big warehouse or often in a machine these days, and a little bit of water is added. The barley starts to sprout, and then they stop the sprouting, because basically what happens, the grain starts to generate a sort of sugar energy for growth, and you stop the growth of the barley by drying and kilning at various temperatures. And you can see all that white stuff. Basically all that white stuff is the sugar that's going to convert to alcohol when we ferment the beer. So here we go, so lovely stuff. Okay, the boiler has reached 100 degrees C, and you can see we're starting to develop a nice rolling boil in the boiler. So I'm going to turn off the boiler and I'm going to let it cool down. Now that's taken, it turned on at 7:40 in the morning. It's now nearly 20 past 9, so it's taken an hour and 40 minutes. So let me just turn the fan on because it's getting a little bit steamy in here. So I'll let that cool down to less than 80 degrees C, then some of that water, boiled and cooled, will go into the mash tun. These are the other malts I'm going to use today. I've got Crystal, I've got some porridge oats, I've got torrefied wheat, Cara malt, Munich malt. Combined I'm going to use about 600 grams, so I'm just going to weigh it here and then take it out to the shed with me. And you can see, as always, I make a careful note of everything I'm doing. The water in the boiler is at 80. I'm going to take off 10 litres into the mash tun. I'll then refill this and get it to boil again because we need that full ready for the sparging in the next stage. I've added all the grain to the mash tun. I now need to deploy my trusty spoon, and I need to make sure that all of the grain comes into contact with the water, because the idea is that we want the water to dissolve the sugar away from the grain to create a sort of sugary extract. So I'll crack on because I need to get this stirred and then sealed up. That's the mash tun all stirred up and sealed. I will now leave this for an hour and a half. Fear not, I won't be going to have a nice lie down. I've got to refill the boiler, I've got to go and check on all my sterilisation, plus I've also got to rehydrate the yeast. So let's crack on. Ready to rehydrate the yeast. The yeast I'm using is Liberty Bell yeast from Jack's, and all I do is tip it in here, let it sit for 15 minutes and give it a stir, then cover it over and then just let it and leave it, and it just rehydrates. This is one of my favourite parts of brewing. The mash tun has been sitting for an hour and a half, and we take off the lid and oh, what a glorious malty Ovaltine smell. I'm just going to run off the first bit of the extract. There we go. And that will be quite full of sediment, so what I do is run it off for a bit, then stick it back through, and this will act as a filter bed to try and capture those fine particles and help clarify the extract. So I'll let it run for a few minutes and then I'll take the extract for real. Here we go. This is the extract. It's known as sweet wort at this stage, and this is just a sugary solution. So let's have a quick taste of this. Oh, it's gloriously sugary, about to rot your teeth, and that will convert into alcohol when it's brewed. You can see I've attached a small plastic pipe on the end of the tap of the boiler, and at the end I have the fine rose from a watering can, and I use this to spray the water over the surface of the malt to try and wash out any residual sugar. And I've got all this water, this boiled and cooled water, so it's been boiled and then it's cooled to less than 80, and this is known as sparging. So I'll just do this. This will take about 15-20 minutes for this to go through, and I'll probably have to change this container. So this first bucket will be the most concentrated, the second one won't be as concentrated, but it'll be my sort of top up water for later. With that lovely rolling boil on the, get as close as I can, this will white out. Now the sweet wort is ready and boiling. It's time to add the hops. So I'm going to start with Target, and I'm going to add Citra, Cascade, and I'm going to dry hop with East Kent Goldings. Hops come in two forms. This is the sort of leaf variety. So basically this is just the normal hop cones which have been dried and vacuum packed. So I'm going to add this one first. This is the Target. So I just typically just tip them in and give them a bit of a stir just to make sure that they all go in properly. The hop boil stage converts the sweet wort to bitter wort by the addition of hops. You also lose about 10% of the liquid itself, so this is why I've got this excess. I've just added some extra, maybe a couple of litres, and it's knocked the temperature down to about mid-90s. So it's got to go back up to temperature again. This is pretty normal. This is my other favourite stage in the brewing process, the hop boil. Just so aromatic, the whole place smells like a brewery, it's sort of dynamic and bubbling, and it's magic. The second hop addition has just gone in, and I've also put in the copper chiller, and the reason we do that in the last 10 minutes of the boil is to sterilise the copper chiller itself. Just added the last of the hops. This one, you can see the bag in there was pellet hop, so this tends to disintegrate right down to a mush. That's why you put it in a little muslin bag, just to try and keep the mush all in one place. So this is going to go off in a minute, and I'll turn on the chiller. That's the hop boil done, and the chiller is on. You can feel cold water going in here. That goes in, that's very cold, that goes in the bottom of the coil and then swirls its way around up the heat exchanger. It comes out of here, you can feel, oh, that's really, really hot. And then that's taking the hot water away, and this will cool this down from 100 down to less than 30, less than 10 minutes. Brilliant, fantastic. Okay, the bitter water is chilled, and you can see I'm now getting it into the primary fermentation bin. Woohoo! So pretty much on the home straight now. So this will then go back into the house, pitch the yeast, and it'll sit for a week. Right, the last step. There's the yeast. There's the bitter wort. Let's just get this pitched in. There you go. Here we are 5 days later, and the primary fermentation has finished. A couple of days ago, and we go have a look inside, I popped in this hop tea bag, and that will actually add some nice aroma and flavour to the beer. I've got my pressure barrel ready and my siphon. I've just put in some beer finings into the pressure barrel, and I'm going to siphon all of this into the pressure barrel. It's only going to stay in here for a couple of days, and then I will then transfer the beer to bottles. There we go, that's pretty much filled the pressure barrel. You can see what we've got left in the bottom of fermenter. There's a lot of yeast and sort of very, very fine malt, etc. I've also taken off some of the beer to test, because at this stage I need to see how much sugar is left in there, because if I add more sugar to here and it's still got sugar in it, the danger is that when I put it in bottles it could explode. So I just need to double check that this is all the sugar has been converted to alcohol. Here we go, I've got 42 bottles ready to be filled, and my pressure barrel, the beer's been sitting here for a couple of days, so I've now got my evening cut out. I've got to transfer all of this into these. These need rinsing first because they've got a sterilising solution in them. Before I start filling the bottles, I've dissolved 50 grams of sugar in some boiling water, and I'm going to use this syringe to add a small amount of sugary water to each of these bottles. Then I will add the bitter water into here, and this will then kick-start fermentation. So these bottles will be sealed up, so they'll be essentially pressurised containers. This will then trap the CO2 in the beer, and after 4 weeks we'll have a nice frothy beer at the end of it, fingers crossed. I've attached my trusty bottling wand, and this is a very simple device. At the end, the simple mechanism which when you press the bottle into it, releases the beer into the bottle. When I release it, it stops. It's a very simple filling mechanism. So I'll stop before it gets to about there. There we go. Oh, there we go. So put a bit more in. Oh, that'll do. That's plenty. Okay, about half my bottles have got these swing top caps, and the other half require a crown cap. And this machine here crimps the edges of the cap onto the bottle. It's very, very simple. You place the cap on there, and then this goes on top, and you pull the levers down and it squeezes the cap onto the bottle. Dead easy. There you go. Now I recycle, or I drink beer and then I wash the bottles out, and you have to make sure that the bottle has a decent lip at the top. Some bottles have a very narrow sort of bulgeous bit here, so that doesn't work with the crown capper. So you have to make sure, if you're going to recycle bottles, to make sure they've all got a decent bit for the crown capper to grab onto. So that's a very good sight. 42 bottles filled up and ready for the secondary fermentation. So they're going to be in those bottles for 4 weeks before they're ready. So where are we? 17th of March, so mid-April they'll be ready. Woohoo! That's my beer cupboard refilled. Job done. Okay everyone, that's the end of the brewing video. Happy brewing everyone.